Come on. Okay, hi everyone. We're just going to encourage you all to come up close and not sit so far in the back. Carol, you want to? You can sit anywhere. You can probably even, yeah. I wanted to welcome everyone, and we're so grateful that you're here. Thank you for coming. My name is Lauren Park, and I am the chair of the Tikkun Olam Committee here at Congregation Har HaShem. And these are my two colleagues. I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
I am Lynn Stein with Neve Kodesh.
And I'm Beth Ornstein. I'm with the Tikkun Olam Committee at Congregation Bonei Shalom.
So this is a collaboration between three synagogues as well as Hillel on the CU campus. And this is the second event we've done pertaining to immigration issues that's been a collaboration. And so that's sort of a new thing that's come out of this that we're really excited about. So thank you all for coming. I just want to acknowledge that this has been a very challenging week for the Jewish community. We have felt a lot of pain, a lot of shock. We feel very vulnerable, and it's been hard. It's been a hard week, and we've had a tremendous outpouring of support and love and good wishes and everything from outside of the Jewish community, which has really helped. It's been very meaningful, and it's made us feel not so alone. And so having this event this week where we are feeling outraged about another vulnerable community that's here in Boulder County, which is our immigrant neighbors, also feels very meaningful. And I feel like this is sort of the way that we need to move forward. We need to move forward in solidarity. We need our combined strength to help us bend this arc to justice. And so I feel really good about the fact that we are standing up for one another, we are supporting one another, we have each other's backs, and that's why we're here, to help.
Thanks, Lauren. Everything Lauren said, and I've been so looking forward to this event from weeks ago when, I first learned about it. Lauren and Beth were gracious to let Neve join as a co-sponsor.
Did was Modus Theater, collaboration with Rabbi Mark Soloway and Rabbi Fred Reed, helping to read one of the monologues from Modus Theater, and it was a very moving program. And this is, just another follow-up on what can we do practically with respect to immigration issues in our community.
So I'm going to use this. And I want to thank you, Laura, Lynn, and Beth, for all that you're doing and for being here tonight. I'm Rabbi Ruthie Gelfarb with Congregation Har HaShem. And when there is no truth, there is no kindness. When there is no truth, there is no kindness. And those words were written in the 12th century by the distinguished Jewish philosopher Ibn Ezra, who lived in Muslim Spain. How little things change. I think our people are also so aware of how immigration policy and media and politics can do great harm. I was reminded that in 1654, Peter Stuyvesant called the Jewish people repugnant and a deceitful race, and sought to expel the Jewish people from the colony. I also was aware that at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, there was great stereotyping of Jewish people as greedy, dishonest, untrustworthy, widespread in the popular culture. And I don't know if you know, but I learned that in 1862, General Ulysses S. Grant issued an order to expel Jews from areas under his control. So the marginalizing of immigrants and people who are different is a story we are well acquainted with, and one that we are called upon not only to learn about, but to act upon. And the folks we're going to hear tonight, we are so grateful for, working on immigration policy and advocacy and direct service with immigrants, providing legal services. And our tradition teaches the most important thing is Torah, learning. Why? So that it leads to action. And my prayer for us tonight is that what we hear and what we learn will lead us to act in a way that is compassionate and just. Please join me in saying Amen.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Kathy Carlson. I'm a member of the Immigrant Protection Team here in Boulder. We're recently formed. We are building a community of individuals here in Boulder County that are interested in coming together, building a sense of community, learning together, and taking action together on behalf of our immigrant neighbors. So I'm excited that people are interested in this program tonight. If you're interested in learning more about the Immigrant Protection Team in Boulder, please feel free to chase me down afterwards. Kristen Aldereti, who's the head of our Immigrant Protection Team in Boulder here in Orange, is also a member that, and we'd be happy to talk to you afterwards. And tonight, we stand on the ancestral lands of the Cheyenne, the Ute, the Arapaho, other tribes who have used these lands forever. Most of us in the room are immigrants, and we all have that as part of our ancestry. We are going to hear tonight from Mary Jo Hyland. She's a attorney with the Meyer Law Firm. I can't thank the Mary Jo and the Meyer Law Firm enough for being an ally for us. They've been helping us try to figure out what the heck is going on with immigrant policy and understanding the differences between the law that we know and the law as it's shifting. And we're also going to hear from Lisa Moreno from El Comité de Longmont. Lisa's been in our community here for decades in various roles and is now the executive director there. El Comité de Longmont has been helping our immigrant community for 45 years now, and they're a treasure and an incredible resource for us. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary Jo.
Does this one work as well? Great. Hi, good evening. Even though our office is in Denver, I'm actually a Boulder County resident. I live in Lafayette now. I lived in South Boulder for a while. And if I look vaguely familiar to some of you, I coordinated the stay of Ingrid and Clara Latorre, who lived in sanctuary at the Unitarian Church in Boulder. And that was my pathway to becoming an immigration attorney. So I feel deep connections to this community. I'm not just a Denver attorney that drove up.
Just real quickly, our firm, we specialize in the intersection between criminal law and immigration law because immigration law is very unfriendly to anyone with any type of criminal contact, any contact with the criminal justice or injustice system. We also do a fair amount of advocacy and policy work. For example, Jared Polis just signed a law strengthening some protections at courthouses. We have some laws that allow for immigrants who have pled guilty to something that's going to affect their immigration case to withdraw that guilty plea once they realize that it affects their immigration case. And so we worked with the legislature on that bill that strengthens some of those things. This slideshow is taken from, I added a bunch of slides. I really appreciated hearing how important learning is. This is a very education-based slideshow right now, and I look forward to the questions, but I want to give you some meat first. But this is taken from a slideshow that we usually give the second half of it to the immigrant community. So you'll see slides in English and Spanish. Our clientele are predominantly long-term residents in the United States, predominantly from Mexico, but not exclusively. Everyone at our firm is bilingual. So if you have very specific questions about, for example, a family from Afghanistan, I may or may not be able to answer those specific questions because that community has different paths. And that's a good disclaimer. When we get to the question and answer, I will not answer super specific questions, especially if they're about your own. Maybe you might have to word it in a hypothetical because I can't give legal advice to anyone who's not my client. So I'm going to give you a little Immigration Law 101 because we hear so much about how immigrants are criminals and how crossing the border without permission now is a federal crime. And the assumption sometimes is, well, then the justice system that they go through is also very similar to the criminal justice system, and it's not. Immigration law is administrative law, is considered civil law, so it's no big deal. And so we're about to see that some of the consequences of immigration law are very, very severe, and the protections are very minimal. Real quickly, this is the framework. So we see president at the top, executive, and then in charge of all of it. And if we start way over on the right, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, we all know who ICE is. They will often come with police vests on. They are not police, but they are the enforcement wing of DHS. Customs Border Protection, pretty self-explanatory. USCIS, I've heard described as the DMV of the immigration system. That's who, if you have an affirmative application, meaning you're not in court, but you married a U.S. citizen and now you want to apply for something, you send it to USCIS. And I will say that I worked at the DMV during COVID a little bit in Longmont, so I only have nice things to say about people from the DMV. They were all wonderful to work with. But the stereotype of the DMV can mirror the stereotype of USCIS from a time standpoint of how long it takes them to decide things. And then one thing the immigration courts are in yellow there because I wanted to remember to point out to you, these are not what attorneys will call Article III courts, where they're an more independent body. This is, the judges are appointed by the Attorney General, by the President. They're very politically slanted often, and we're going to talk about some of that. Real quickly, because I worked with Ingrid, and we all know the sensitive locations memo was rescinded, meaning there are no protected spaces anymore, anywhere, and that does get into some harboring questions now. So there's a law where it's a felony to do any of the following: bring someone to the United States without official permission, transport undocumented non-citizens within the United States, harbor undocumented non-citizens, encourage or induce non-citizens to reside in the U.S. without official permission, employ more than 10 non-citizens in a year, or conspiracy to commit any of those. This is a federal crime, and so we're not going to get into the weeds of this, but a lot of people have questions about what harboring means, and I just have one copy of it, so I can leave it for someone to make copies for those of you who are interested, but it does call into question what it would mean now to hold someone in sanctuary, and would that be a federal crime? And I'm here as an attorney, and my ethics requirements force me to say you may only follow the law. As a legal advice, follow the law. If I'm going to step outside of the attorney role, some morals may or may not supersede the law. But I just want people to be aware of what the risk could be. And our firm has been consulting with organizations who want to know what their own personal risk is if they do X, Y, or Z. And so that's something that we're open to if one of your congregations wanted to reach out and get an individualized assessment. But maybe we could have general questions about that, but it really gets detailed depending on what types of activities people are hoping to do. Okay, for Immigration Law 101, I'm going to run through these pretty quickly, but I just want to show if somebody is detained by ICE, what their process should look like, used to look like, okay? So detained by ICE, the case is filed with immigration court while they're detained. Then they request, or their attorney requests, a bond hearing. We're going to talk about the bond hearing in a minute. Then they're either released on bond or not released on bond. And then they have some preliminary hearings in the immigration world. We call those master calendar hearings. And then after one or more master calendar hearings are done kind of in a group. There are a number of people in the same room. They're more like status hearings. A merits hearing is the individual case, so like the asylum case, for example, that's the most common that the lay person might have heard of, will happen if the person's in detention, maybe 3 to 6 months after they've been detained. Then either side may appeal. We're going to talk about why that's important in a minute as well. While the appeal is pending, that person, if they didn't get bond, remains detained. If the appeal is granted, there still might be more hearings because there's still another layer of appeals that could happen. And then once all of the appeals are exhausted, that person is either removed or they win their case and they are released from detention. This process could take 1 to 2 years while the person's detained. If the person's not detained, if they get out at that third step on bond, then the process could take 4 to 6 to 10 years, depending on how many appeals there are, what kind of relief they're asking for. But now we've always had this, but now being used more frequently is something called expedited removal. So you saw there were about 12 steps just a slide ago. And now there are 3 steps. Get detained by ICE, an ICE officer, not a judge, not someone who's been to law school, not someone who's studied the law. An ICE officer signs an expedited removal order, and the person's removed. This is primarily focused on people who have been here less than 2 years. However, the government's looking to expand that and to people who had some type of contact with immigration within 2 years of their arrival. So this is what we're up against. And this is the slide about before January, they were only putting people into expedited removal if they were detained within 100 miles of the border within 14 days of arrival and they didn't have lawful status. And now this is happening all over the US. This slide says within 2 years of arrival, but that, like I said, that's being expanded. Okay, I have a bunch of slides on this because this fascinates me when we paint immigrants as criminals. However, the system actually treats them worse than criminals. So, in criminal law, I imagine everybody in here could more or less recite those Miranda warnings. You have the right to remain silent, anything, right? No Miranda warnings in immigration. When someone's detained by ICE, there are no Miranda warnings. And not only that, if an immigrant remains silent in court, the judge is allowed to take a negative inference from remaining silent. Meaning, oh, you're not answering that question? I can assume that the answer to that question would be something you don't want to tell me. It would be against what you would want to say. There are no public defenders for immigrants. Immigrants always have to either find a pro bono attorney, which is near impossible. Remain in our community does amazing work and has an incredibly long wait list. So immigrants have to find an attorney, which is expensive. And in criminal law, you can only be found guilty of conduct that was a crime when it was committed. So let's say tomorrow it becomes a crime to wear a plaid suit on Fridays. If I don't wear this suit again tomorrow, I'm not going to be convicted of that crime. But if I admit in immigration court that I wore a plaid suit on Thursday, even though it didn't become a crime until Friday, that can be held against me. That I can be, if that became a crime that was determined to be a deportable offense, I can be deported for it, even though when I did it, it wasn't a crime. Statute of limitations don't apply. When you're in criminal detention, you get a custody hearing pretty much right away, within 48 hours. And in that slide we showed about the bond hearing, that usually takes, right now we're seeing probably 4 weeks after being detained before somebody even has the hearing about getting bond. In the criminal context, the government has to prove that the defendant is dangerous or is a flight risk. In the immigration context, the immigrant has to prove a negative. The immigrant has to prove that they are not dangerous and that they are not a flight risk. And right now, the local immigration judges out of Aurora, out of the for-profit detention center, are determining that people who have lived here less than 2 years are just naturally a flight risk. Because if you've lived here less than 2 years, who's to say that you're not going to flee? So that's a very high bar. Guilty pleas in criminal law have to be confirmed in front of someone neutral, a neutral magistrate who confirms that the person understands the consequences of their guilty plea. No such thing in immigration. An ICE officer can get you to sign the equivalent of a guilty plea, which is sign your own deportation order without someone neutral affirming that. No presumption of innocence. DHS doesn't have to give me any type of evidence that would help my client, but in criminal law, that's actually a requirement. The prosecution has to turn over this type of evidence. There's a right to a speedy trial. We just saw, I just told you the timeline for immigrants, there's no speedy trials. Criminal trials happen in the same district where the crime occurred. Immigrants are sent all over the country. They're intentionally sent to other detention centers that are far away from where their attorney or their family or the evidence that would show they're not a flight risk or they're not dangerous is. Hearsay is admissible in immigration court in much greater ways than in criminal court. DHS uses unlawfully obtained evidence all the time. And I personally think that deporting somebody who's been here 20 years, has U.S. citizen children, is cruel and unusual punishment. So we don't have a bar to cruel and unusual punishment in immigration law. Like I said before, we were going to talk about appeals. So when a defendant in criminal court wins their case, meaning they are found not guilty, the government can't appeal that. The prosecutor cannot appeal and say, well, we still think you're guilty, so we're going to try this again. That's called double jeopardy. That happens all the time in immigration court. So we go to immigration court, we win our asylum case, DHS appeals it. We have to win it again. And in criminal law, judges are put through some type of neutral vetting. Sometimes it's elections, sometimes it's some kind of nominating commission. And I'm not an expert in the procedure in criminal courts, but my impression is there's more of a balance between former prosecutors and former defenders who become judges. In immigration court, it's almost exclusively people who were former prosecutors, who were former DHS attorneys, or people who have no concept of immigration law and had the right friends or the right type of money and got appointed. I think I'm going to skip this slide. This slide's about some types of relief, asylum, other things. If we want to talk about it in questions, we can. Okay, and then I think it's time to maybe shift from learning about all these atrocities that happen in immigration court to what can we do to help. I'm probably going to jump through a lot of the constitutional rights because I think we are getting more and more knowledgeable about those, right? Those rights of not opening the door, telling your neighbors, don't answer the door, don't roll down your window when you're pulled over and just sit in the car. The rights about needing a warrant. The one thing I'm going to say about the warrant piece is people get really focused on whether it's a judicial warrant or an administrative warrant. Here's the shortcut. I have never seen ICE use a judicial warrant. I've never seen it. So chances are, if you're in a situation where ICE is showing you a warrant, it's not the right kind. It's not the right kind. So rather than getting in the weeds of what a judicial warrant and an administrative warrant looks like and what it needs to have, they don't use them. Why? They don't need to. They're so far able to do, I pause because I think about San Diego. I actually grew up in San Diego, and if any of you saw the news in the last, 10 days about North Park in San Diego, where ICE wanted to raid a restaurant, and the citizens really stood up and said, not in our community. So that's heartwarming, I think, in some ways. Okay, and we've got the right to record others. One thing I want to say about that is I recently read a pamphlet that said, don't film, act. And it had some interesting thoughts about how when we film, we think we're doing something. But we're seeing the police and ICE are now being filmed all the time. And the bad acts are still happening. So maybe filming isn't enough. So like this San Diego example, I think filming is important because you have evidence of, I didn't actually hit an ICE officer, I didn't commit X crime, but the thought of maybe my responsibility doesn't end with filming, or maybe I'm ready to do something else besides just filming. Maybe I'm ready to disrupt, or maybe I'm ready to put myself in the way. It's an interesting thought. So I'm gonna skip these slides because I know we're tight on time tonight. But you get to see, these are the presentations that we give to the community. So if you do have people who are interested in that type of presentation, we do it. I think another thing is to really understand the rhetoric around immigration and around immigrants. So I don't use the word illegal for a number of reasons. First, it's dehumanizing. And I was a teacher before I was an immigration attorney, and what gets me is it's kind of just grammatically incorrect, because illegal describes conduct, not people. And so I use neighbor, community member, non-citizen, person without documents. I also think illegal is often incorrect because it's used as a blanket term, and while there is a federal crime for crossing the border without permission, and there's also a federal felony for crossing a second time without permission, and so that conduct technically is illegal. That doesn't describe every person in the country without the proper documentation. So these federal crimes do have a statute of limitations. So if they weren't prosecuted for those crimes within the time, then that conduct technically, under the letter of the law, is no longer illegal. Also, people without status might have come here lawfully, meaning with a visa, with some kind of tourist permission, some work permission, and just don't have the formal next step, the green card or whatever the next step is that they need. And so they're technically not doing anything illegal. There's not actually a federal crime for remaining in the United States without permission at this time. There's an immigration crime for it. There's an immigration offense, shall we say, since it's just administrative law. There's an immigration offense for it, but there's not a federal criminal crime. It's the border crossing without permission. That's the criminal offense. And then, again, rather than using the word alien, we use the word person, non-citizen, foreign national. Alien divides rather than connects. And so I think a simple thing to do is just stay aware of language. Bear witness. We have some Know Your Rights cards out on the table. I think we also have paperwork about the Colorado Rapid Response Network, how you can even volunteer to be a confirmer and either film or disrupt or whatever their training allows you to do. Engage in the political process, holding elected officials and representatives accountable. Colorado is a safer place to be, but we still need to hold our officials and our elected representatives accountable. There's more they can do. And that is all for me for now. I think, yeah, don't misinterpret that as we're ready for questions. That's just normally where the question piece comes on mine.
I might need help getting out of this. There we go. Probably pulling up things on someone else's computer that I shouldn't be pulling up. Oh, there it was. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? All right.
it's a PDF. Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Moreno. I'm the executive director of El Comité, and I have been in this seat in this job for about a year and a half. My background is all politics and policy. I got my start working for Pat Schroeder in DC, where I was legislative staff for 7 years. So all the skills, I always felt like I had this super squiggly career that made no sense. But now as the executive director of this tiny little nonprofit in Longmont, I feel like everything I ever did before is required to do this job in this time. And I had no idea that it would ever make any sense at all. El Comité has been around for 45 years. Let's see if I can move things forward properly. In 45 years, nothing has ever been updated. Our website's never been taken care of. This is our new mission that we just, judged up at the end of last year. We are pro bono with Holland and Hart, and the next steps that we're doing with them is exactly what Mary Jo was just talking about, and who knows if this language might have to change again. But for today, we're a social justice and human services organization that supports, educates, connects, and advocates to eliminate barriers and empower Latino and immigrant community members. We have traditionally been mostly Longmont serving. The organization was started after 2 young Chicano men were killed on Main Street by the police over a verbal altercation, and that was in 1980. I'm looking at most of you, and you may feel like I do about 1980. It kind of feels like it was just yesterday, but Longmont evidently was a completely different place in 1980. And I had a conversation recently with several of the founders about, as we start to change things, I wanted to know what they thought we needed to definitely hold onto. And one of them said, well, the reason we did it is because we wanted to make sure that those young men's lives were not lost in vain. So they created the organization to hold the city accountable, hold them feet to the fire for the changes that they were demanding in the relationships between the community and the police, but also just for equity in general in Longmont, and to help the community. So 45 years later, we're still there, and our doors are open to anyone who wants to walk into it. So we do 4 things. We use what many human services folks think is an outdated model, but we are still walk-in services. And the reason we're walk-in services is because it's culturally familiar to people, and they also know they can just come when it works for them. They may have to sit for a little while, but they know they're going to get seen that day for whatever it is. So we have a team of 3 case managers. They do resource navigation. We provide a little bit of direct assistance with thanks to some grants. We do systems advocacy, and literally people bring problems to us that just, the range of what people bring is hard to imagine. I mean, I've had someone come in and say, I have solar panels, and I don't know why I'm paying $300 a month in utilities, and spent hours breaking down all of his utility bills and figuring out the 3 months of the first year when he had his solar panels that they actually worked, and getting him set up with someone to come assess them. To someone calling and having a nice check-in and being afraid to go alone. People who need help with rental assistance for a particular point in time. We had someone once who showed up, a young man who wanted his driver's license. He was just graduating from high school in Longmont, and he was 18 and more than anything else wanted his driver's license. And he had been to the DMV 4 times, and every single time he went, they gave him another list of documents that he had to go find. And the problem was that he mostly grew up in Mexico, and even though he was standing there with his birth certificate and the receipt that his mother gave him from his birth at Longmont United, they still kept giving him a demand for more documents. So we got on the phone with the DMV in Denver and got it sorted out and helped him identify exactly what he needed to go get. And this is what we do all day long. We fill out a lot of applications and bills and workers' comp and child support and until recently ITINs. We have a huge wage theft problem in Boulder County. It's mostly a Longmont issue more than any part of the county, but it is a huge problem, and there's no rational policy solution to it. It's a problem across the state as well, except in the city of Denver. But that was something I thought we were going to get to work on this year, but the election happened, and it isn't something we get to work on this year. We also help people access attorneys, which is something that El Comité has done from its very beginning. So we work with a network of attorneys who give their time to us pro bono, and then they do consults in our office. So we do charge $30 for those consults, just so that people actually show up for their appointments. We waive that if people need it waived. So we have immigration attorneys. We have a criminal defense attorney who, like Mary Jo, does crimigation. Is that how you call it? And we also have a civil attorney who come and do consults there. And then we have a network of other types of attorneys, including civil rights attorneys that we've had to refer people out to. We have a small education program, which at one point El Comité had the state grant for adult ed because the school district had closed down their adult ed program, and El Comité took it over. What we have now is a much smaller version of that. It's 2 ESL classes, an advanced class and a beginning class, and those run in 5-week sessions for $25, and we do 7 sessions a year. We also have free GED and free citizenship test prep classes, which are done in partnership with the local church. And finally, we do a ton of community engagement, not only tabling at every event that there ever happens in Longmont and Boulder County in the summer. We in the past have always hosted a pretty large health fair, and this year we decided that that was not going to be happening. It felt just like putting too many people at risk to have a big outdoor event. But in 2024, which was the first full year that I was on staff, we served over 3,700 people with our team of 3. And then, the election happened. And since the election, Mary Jo's done a great job of explaining all these. I've been updating this on a kind of bi-weekly basis, and I keep thinking that it's just going to begin to look like a Willy Wonka contract where it's just a long thing of little tiny font. But we're at 318 total policy and law changes to immigration law. I don't need to go into any of them much, but some of these are really impacting the lives of the people that we serve. And in aggregate, the people that we serve, as you all are also living with fear, they're living with fear every day. And then I don't even have to explain this to you. You know what it's like when you're living with fear every day, and yet you have to do the annoying thing of life, right? You have to get up and go to the grocery store, and you have to get eggs, and you have to go to work, and you have to take care of the kids, or you have to do all those regular things. And you have to do it bravely and joyfully and still find a way to make your way through life. And that's what our participants do every day. They're some of the bravest, strongest, and most amazing people that I know. The rhetoric is always like, how much they rely on the system, and I just have never known anybody that can make a buck stretch further than the people that we serve. So our work this year, our outreach work, has completely reoriented to Know Your Rights. We've been hosting Know Your Rights events monthly, and then we've been doing a lot of family emergency preparedness events. I think the hardest ones oh my gosh, I'm misspelling, excuse that, I'm so embarrassed. I think the hardest of these to walk people through and to watch people navigate is the family emergency preparedness. I know, for everyone in Boulder with assets and kids, you think this through anyway because of floods and fires. But most of our participants have never thought any of this through. And the idea of trying to find someone that they want to put their kids, in the hands of is just a really heart-wrenching thing. And the ones that I've attended, people show up who are single parents and don't have anybody, or people who are just single people and they don't really think they have anybody that they can rely on. So it is a really tough thing to help people think through, and yet everybody has to think it through. I mean, as we all know, living in this county and with all the disasters, how do you protect your assets, how do you protect your family, and even how do you protect your pets? Things that I've so accompaniment, my misspelled word. A 3 weeks ago, we got a call from a participant, someone who actually lived in Broomfield, and she had just out of the blue been called in for an ICE check-in. And this is something that we had never been called for before. So we said, well, I said, unlike the rest of my staff who are hourly, I can go. And so I met her in Firestone, and there's a little ICE office on the second floor of a bank building, next in the same parking lot as a Safeway. It's very eerily unassuming. And she was late, which I thought was interesting. And she had her 2 little kids in tow. She was Venezuelan. She had a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. And then when they called, they said, what do we do? And I said, well, we think that you should probably prepare just in case you are detained at this visit. So you should have all your essentials with you so that it goes with you if you are detained. Pack snacks for the kids and whatever you need. So we walk up the stairs to the office together, and they invite her into her appointment, and I stay out in the lobby with the children, and there's nobody else in the lobby. So it's just me and these 2 kids, and the little boy, who's 3, opens his backpack, and at the very top of the backpack is a Jedi fighter action figure, and then underneath it, the whole backpack is filled with Hot Wheels. Which was just a reminder to me that essentials are totally subjective. And that is clearly what he thought he needed if he was never coming back. But this is a role that we're going to be asked to do a lot more. And we definitely need volunteers who are able and willing to go meet somebody at an ICE office or at court. And even though it may feel like there's nothing that you can do, sometimes when there's nothing we can do, being a witness is the most important thing we can do. Maybe even asking for the phone numbers of their family in case they don't come back to let them know. And this is the work that Kathy and her team are beginning to organize, but it's going to become more and more important. Gaps that I notice in the community because of the work that we do, there's, I don't want to say absolutely no, but there is very, very, very minimal access to affordable immigration attorneys in our community. There's CU Law School Immigration Defense Clinic that only functions when school's in session, and they aren't able to take a lot of cases because the students are learning how to be attorneys, right? They will be adding another more experienced attorney to that team, so they will be increasing their capacity some in the next year or 2. It's still not enough. If it's only affirmative cases, so processing applications, then for things like, well, I don't even know exactly how to describe it, affirmative things, renewing DACA, work permits, green cards, that type of thing. You can go to Boulder IU, the Immigrant Legal Center here in Boulder, but they're also still very limited about the number of cases that they can actually take. When I think about our 3,700 people that we've served, they all need an immigration consultant, so our immigration consult. So this is an issue that I'm trying to solve. And then, depending on what happens with the tax bill, I think we can, it has billions, hundreds of billions of dollars in the bill for immigration enforcement and exponential increase in the number of enforcement officers. So if that bill passes the Senate, and the immigration provisions in the bill are the least controversial provisions in the bill. So if that bill passes, I think that we can expect enforcement actions and detentions to increase exponentially across the country, but we already know that Boulder is a target. So I think we can expect to see that here. And we are going to see remnants of families that are going to need immediate support to help stabilize while they figure out how to adjust to a new normal. So we're going to need community help to make that happen. So these are just some things that you can do right now. Certainly we could use any donations, which will help us keep our doors open, keep doing what we do, but also we need an immigration attorney. We need you all, which I'm sure you're already doing, using your voice in any way that works for you. Just stop there. We have volunteers who are hosting house parties for us. If anybody's interested in doing that, it helps us raise funds and connect to more people and talk about what's going on. Mary Jo and Kathy, I think, talked a little bit about the Colorado Rapid Response Network. There is a need for confirmers with the network. We have a training happening tomorrow. The flyer is out on the table. I was just informed that someone tried to register and the registration was closed. It is going to be reopened for us until 9 a.m. tomorrow. So if you are interested, there's 40 copies of the flyer out there. You can just take it with you and register on your way home. And then you can read the rest of this. I think the most important thing to me when I think about all of this, like, I don't believe that we're going to be able to save everybody. But I think that we can witness, and I think we can make very intentional decisions about who we are as a community while these things happen, and how we can come together to support our friends and neighbors. And I think that's going to be the most important thing, that at the end of the day, have we all done what we thought we were up for doing? Are we who we think we are? Up.
I have a question for Lisa. Do you have to live in Longmont to receive services and assistance from El
Great
Comité?
question. Absolutely not. Like I said, we'll serve anyone who walks in our door. About 70% of the people we served last year were from Longmont. Another 20 were from greater Boulder County, and then the rest were from surrounding counties, sometimes even other states.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I am curious. There's been all this talk blaming Democrats, saying immigration's broken, and then they had that joint bill where they all worked really hard and it was supposed to be better, maybe not perfect, but then Trump wasn't president, but he didn't let them pass it. I don't even understand what that would have done to make the problem better. I'm not even clear. I mean, obviously there are a million problems, but what's the problem? Does that make sense? Like, I mean, is the problem that some people just don't want anyone to come, or I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm not being clear, but I'm really trying to.
Yeah. Do you want to start, or do you want me? Yeah.
I would first say that starting from the premise that this administration has any interest in governing will mislead you. So start there. The immigration system has been challenged for a really long time. It's been underfunded, it doesn't have enough people to get things through in a timely way, and under the first Trump administration, they did everything they could to throw as many wrenches in the system and make it more difficult.
I think the immigrant community has been politicized. They're political pawns. No, I haven't heard of it. I don't think so. There's talk of
The
it.
judge in
Yeah, yes, but then she ended up getting,
immunity because she's a judge.
yeah, so from a community member, do you have an answer? Oh, okay. From a community member standpoint or a congregational standpoint, I haven't heard of anything. Right now, I'm hearing it as threats that, finger wagging. We will prosecute you for this, but I haven't heard of it in reality yet. But
violations of federal law, is there a special federal magistrate that just deals with immigration issues as part of the 10th district? Or not?
no, I don't think so. No. Yeah, it would be, yeah, just a criminal prosecution.
Will the slides be available?
I can make them available.
Yeah.
I mean, mine have already been emailed, so
Mine too.
whoever owns them.
The slides from Mary Jo available, we have them, and we can pass them out. And this has a low battery, so it's not, and this as well, yes. So this has a low
Okay.
battery, it's not actually working, so I'm just gonna. Mine was the same question. Same question, yes, and that.
I have a question that you were saying the statute of limitations for undocumented crossing. What is that?
Oh, gosh. The question would be, what's the statute of limitations on the federal crime for unlawful border crossing? I don't remember exactly. I think it's 2 years if it's your first, and maybe 5 years if it's an illegal reentry. But if a person were charged with that, they would most likely get a federal public defender to defend them against that. So it's a little bit adjacent to what I do. Yes.
Okay, so this may be a silly question under the context, yes, is this administration trying to govern? The answer is no. But from a congressional standpoint, are there any federal policies that create pathways to citizenship that we can be supportive of, or is it obviously for the next 4 years, anything will be knocked down? Is there any ounce of hope?
Okay, so the question is federal policies, laws that are hopeful in providing paths.
Part of the reason I recently read the last good comprehensive immigration policies were passed during the Reagan administration, which was wild to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so if we could do it during Reagan, is there anything we could do?
Right, so, and then the follow-up was confirming that the current immigration laws, and so I'll answer the question as I repeat it. The current immigration laws that are on the books are from 1996. I don't think this is the time to if we're getting immigration reform, it's not in the direction we want it. So I think our actions are probably more appropriately spent supporting the community in actionable ways, and then being sand in the gears, not, forcing ICE to do their job lawfully and or disrupting them doing their job.
I just wanted to repeat what Lynn said earlier, because I think it's so relevant to our Jewish community as well as our other communities that, today Trump talked about not letting those 12 countries not letting people from those 12 countries. And his next breath was because of what happened in Boulder. And I think we have, I didn't think about this before you said that. I think we have to speak loudly because it also reinforces anti-Semitism in a weird way. And I for sure don't want that on my back, is that it's my religious fault that now 12 countries can't get here. That's bullshit.
Yes.
So I think we have to speak to truth.
Yes. So just for the live stream, just emphasizing that this tragedy is being used also as a political move, and that it can undermine this community as well.
Just as a footnote to that, ties it to Boulder that Egypt is not on the list.
Yes, and to clarify, the perpetrator of the horrendous crime is from Egypt, and Egypt is not on the list. So Trump's rhetoric tying what happened here to the travel ban is ludicrous. Yeah, bullshit.
However, do keep in mind that Boulder, the entire county, and the city of Boulder, Lafayette, although it was misspelled, so you got to wonder if it was really on the list, and Longmont were all on the list of sanctuary jurisdictions that were posted and then taken back down. So that there would be some sort of concerted effort to target our community is a reasonable way to think about why they might also be saying what they're saying.
The ACLU has been involved in a lot of the large-scale deportation cases. Is that a resource locally?
So the question's about the ACLU and about them being a resource locally because they've been involved in a lot of the deportation cases. The ACLU is doing amazing work, amazing work. They have the know-how and more or less the people power to do some of the federal litigation that needs to be happening, so taking the government to court. We do that a little bit in our firm, but we're more day-to-day family type cases. And so yes, the ACLU's work is amazing. I'm getting married in September and my registry is donate to the ACLU. Yeah. Well, so I don't think they're a resource for people who have they're in detention and they need to get out of detention. The ACLU is more challenging the actions of the administration, the new laws. They will be behind probably the challenge to the travel ban. They're behind removing something called TPS, temporary protected status, for a lot of communities. So if we think of the hierarchy, I would put them at a high level of the things that they challenge and less so the individual cases.
Although they did join with Remain on the third country detentions, protecting Colorado residents.
Can you explain the expedited removal, how the decisions are made, who decides, okay, we can do this now? Where does that authorization come from?
So in an individual case or overall?
This is happening now instead of the long.
Okay. So the question is to explain more about expedited removal and how that process changed from being within 100 miles of the border and within 14 days to now within 2 years, or just having some kind of contact within 2 years. So when Trump took office, Trump and the director of DHS and the Attorney General have all said that we are going to use the statute, the law, that there is a law on the books for expedited removal. We are going to use that to the full extent possible. So they are interpreting it in the broadest way. So the policy of interpreting that in the broadest way has come from the executive. The people on the ground making that decision, though, when somebody comes to an ICE check-in, you know, a bunch of people across the country got texts this week saying, we need you to come do an ICE check-in. So when I went through that procedure of if you get out on bond, most people, even when they're out on bond, have some kind of monitoring. Either an ankle monitor, an app they have to check in, an in-person check-in. Used to be once every 6 months, now it seems to be once a month, things like that. And a lot of people got texts saying, we need you to come in on the 3rd or the 4th to check in. And then a fair amount of people who came in on the 3rd and the 4th check-in were detained. And then that officer decides based on when the person entered, when their first contact with immigration was, and says, oh, you are subject to expedited removal, and so we're going to expeditiously remove you. There's another way this is affecting people. So I think we have a lot of Venezuelan neighbors in the area who have pending asylum claims, pending asylum cases. But they've actually been here for less than 2 years. But if you have a pending case and you already have court scheduled, you are basically not in the expedited removal path. You're in the normal path because you have a case with immigration court. What's happening is these people are going to their court date, to that check-in type hearing that I told you about was fairly early in the process. They're going to that, most of them without attorneys. And the prosecutor, the DHS prosecutor, is saying, you know what, Your Honor, it's no longer in the government's interest to keep this case open. We want to dismiss the case. Dismissing a case generally is a good thing, right? Oh, great, I'm out of court. It's a good thing. But what happens now is this path is closed to them. ICE immediately detains them at the courthouse and puts them in expedited removal because now they're not under the protections of the minimal due process that we get in immigration court. So that is also happening, and we're seeing it almost daily.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, our congregations, I would say by and large, here in Boulder, have not been so intimately linked with the Latino community in Longmont. The lived reality has been, I would say, quite different. My understanding is many people coming who are in Longmont who have very different lives here than what I'd say most of our congregations have. We do have Spanish speakers. I know some of them are in the group being Cuban, Venezuelan. Can you tell us the 3 things that we could do directly with you that might actually help your organization, given who we are and what we have as resources? And if you don't know it, you can get back to us.
Well, I would be a very bad executive director if the first thing that didn't roll off my tongue was donate, donate, donate. And I say that now particularly because we really need to have an immigration attorney on our staff so that we can get as many people as we can through our low-cost consults, and until he's also full and there's a wait list, get people some representation. So that's really important. We will honestly need people to accompany folks to their appointments. Everyone's terrified. We are seeing more people who have unmet financial needs, or anything from insurance to medicines, help with paying for the economy is not looking good for these folks right now, so we do have a small direct assistance fund, and you could help with that. And confirmers. That's 4, but I think.
So if I could just put a little more clarification on that. There are people who are identifying when ICE is taking an action. It's here in Boulder County, and they'll call a hotline, and there's an opportunity for anyone in this room to sign up, to actually go to a place where we think there's ICE activity and confirm whether that action is actually happening. So that's a confirmer. The accompaniers, we've had a training to help people learn what the process is so that they can go to court and go with somebody who has a court date, who's scared to death. As a supporter, you don't have to be a lawyer, you don't have to speak Spanish. It's really a comfort and support for people who are facing one of the most difficult challenges in their lives today. And we're working really closely with El Comité to figure out where those people are needed and get them to the right place at the right time. And those are things that we can be doing. The third thing is the ICE agents are all over the U.S. Immigration Courthouse today. And we are asking people, if they have the time, to take a shift 8 to 10:30, typically in the mornings, through the Immigrant Protection Team here in Boulder and other immigrant protection teams, to show up at the courthouse and be in solidarity with the people who are dealing with this incredibly difficult situation. So 3 things you could do right now. Feel free to sign up. And oh, yes. So there's this is your flyer?
This is ours. Yeah. So the confirmers would be volunteers with the Colorado Rapid Response Network. It's a joint project between American Friends Service Committee Colorado and Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition. And we and some local confirmers are hosting a training tomorrow night in Longmont at Front Range Community College. There are 40 flyers on the back table as you head out the door of the sanctuary, and take one. And they had previously closed the registration, but it's now open until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. if you're interested. And there'll be food, so you don't have to rush eating before you show up. And I know it feels like a long time, but they plan these trainings very gently so that it's not a rush, it's not drinking from a fire hose. They take care of you while you're there.
Real quick, I actually got a text to be a confirmer tonight on the way here for something happening in Louisville, and I did have a moment of, where do I go? And I felt like I could do the most good here, but to underscore the kind of work El Comité is doing, our consultations, if you're not detained, at our office cost $300. If you are detained, they cost $400. At El Comité, they cost $30. So you see how real quickly this gets out of hand for most people. And that's not to say that our firm is making poor decisions. It's just the reality of keeping the doors open at a private business. But there's that need. And I do want to honor time, and I'm happy to stay. I think Lisa's happy to stay, but don't feel like you have to stay if you're thinking, I need to go.
Let's take 2 more questions and then we'll wrap up. Go ahead, Tim.
You brought up the kids, the kid that was there with his Jedi pack and the whole thing. One of my, I do a lot of work in schools, and in some areas, Broomfield specifically right now, attendance amongst Hispanic families is horrible. They're scared to death. Like a family like you mentioned, if that mom was suddenly detained, the kid's a U.S. citizen, let's assume they were born here. They go into social service system, which is already overwhelmed in the normal times. How's it being dealt with? And is there anything that can be done, as congregations?
Probably. I mean, at this scale, None of us have ever been here before. So we get to together invent what needs to happen in our community. I have had some, before this job, I did a stint at the county, so I have a lot of contacts in that universe and have had some conversations with the child welfare folks. It has not gone to the level that it needs to. But, you know, on the prevention side, that's why those family emergency preparedness plans are so important, so that the kids don't end up in that system. But you're absolutely right. It's part of what we need to start planning for.
Okay, so the question is related to travel. And for someone without status wants to travel domestically. So we actually have people, we even have US citizens now who are making consultations with us because they're afraid of traveling out of the country because they've protested or they have social media that's not pro this administration. And so it's a tough call because as an attorney, I like to inform people of their rights. So we're balancing rights and we're balancing risks, rights and risks. So someone without status right now, as long as they have a real ID, and so you did mention that they would have a passport from somewhere else. I haven't seen word of somebody who's traveled continentally having issues. We generally tell people to avoid Texas and Florida. Yeah, and a lot of flights go through Houston. Yeah. Yes. And so we do individualized risk assessments for people. If somebody says, you know, I really need to travel, I have a sick family member, here are all the facts in my case. We'll do individualized risk assessment at a consultation, but in general, as a general advisement right now, not counting Puerto Rico, Hawaii, because you have to think about if there's an emergency and the plane has to make an emergency landing outside of the US. Now, does that person have an exit and another entry to the US, even if they don't deplane? And so that can really put their immigration case at some serious risk. Because the number of times you exit and enter count against you. So.